Welcome back, guys. We have another episode, I guess a special edition episode of these pivotal interviews that I've been doing specifically around COVID-19 and just the effect that it's been going on. Been trying, as you guys know, they've been following on the 10 or so episodes that I've already kind of put out. I've been trying to get across as many perspectives as possible around the CPG industry, retailing, and just trying to create some semblance of a playbook or just some information that people can provide some inspiration or motivation throughout this kind of unprecedented time. So I am actually, I was going to say sitting across from Jeremy Smith, but I guess virtually we are sitting across from each other. But Jeremy Smith is the founder and CEO of LaunchPad Group USA, which is an integrated food brokerage firm, kind of full service. He's not just handling just the representation. He's got a couple other things I'm sure he's going to mention a little bit about that. But his focus is really around high growth emerging food brands that are looking to get into Costco through some representation, maybe some strategy. And he has a huge list of brands, but best known by, Chobani, Bob's Red Mill, Crave Jerky, and I was going to list a bunch more, but I think at that point, I think it's just bragging. So I'll turn this over to Jeremy, and he can kind of give you a little bit of sense of the things that I missed, maybe how he got into this space, and then we can roll into maybe some more things that are happening around COVID-19 with his business.
I had never heard about the brokerage business, had no idea. I was just a Costco shopper, and then around 2003, my brother, who used to work for Costco, called me and said, "I'm going into the brokerage business. Do you want to join me?" And I said, "Well, what is the brokerage business?" And then we had a long conversation about what the brokerage business was. And he was starting a new company called Level One Marketing. And so my brother and I work really well together. We have the type of personalities which I think are really good for partnerships, in that sometimes you meet people that are partners and one is really very different than the other one. And one sometimes is more quiet and the other one is loud. So Jonathan and I were both kind of loud anyway. So and we could get into deep, passionate arguments, and we never took anything personally. Although every once in a while, we'd have some big blowups about, how the business should run and things like that, because we're both very competitive. But it actually pushed us forward. And so he had an operational background, which Costco, which is what our focus is much more of an operational sale. Then you're not going skiing with a buyer as to where with some buyers, they'll party and all that other stuff, but not at Costco. Costco's a much more conservative. They want to keep any sort of influence on the buyer side only, and not allow that kind of entertainment stuff that goes on outside at other retailers. So, and more retailers are headed that way. But anyway, we started this company called Level One, became incredibly successful, focused on mostly Costco, some Sam's Club, and some BJ's. Sold it in 2014 to Advantage Sales and Marketing. Our goal was to really take the emerging brands that we had and use Advantage as a launching pad to help the brands out in retail, and we would take care of the club. But unfortunately, it didn't go as well as we thought it would, because the cultures were we were very entrepreneurial, and nothing against Advantage. They're a good company. They really didn't want to, they weren't set up to do the hand holding, if you will, that emerging brands need, and the deep strategy. They're more point and click PowerPointers, and that's the way most of the brokerage industry is. So it's not unusual, but it just didn't, we just weren't able to sync the cultures. And So they were kind enough to let me leave in 2 years after I completed my servitude. And while I was there, I got a chance to meet some VC guys like Wayne Wu over at VMG and John Hagen over at 301 Inc. And I kicked around some different ideas with them about, what was going on in the industry in their mind. And in 2016, I left and started LaunchPad. So I kind of returned back to my roots of level one, but LaunchPad's a much more diverse group in that we have a relationship with a good friend of mine who's been in the design business at an agency called Market Brand, and we've known each other for 30 years. And so now what the big difference is that we can work with clients if you're let's say you're just starting your business out, you've got zero sales, and you need someone to help you launch everywhere. We can help with that. Although my main focus is Costco, my VP of sales, Monique Parent, she does a lot of the retail stuff as well as Costco. So we kind of built what I think is more of a ad agency model based on brokerage and representation. But I kind of think what we're doing is where the future of the industry is headed.
I think that, there's the concept of just kind of pushing something through with your relationship, and then it's just kind of setting them up for failure where if they don't really have a lot of the strategy, or they don't have the right packaging, like there's something misaligned in the brand. If you're just kind of pushing them onto the big stage, there's going to be some resistance levels that are going to be created because maybe they don't have the right back of the house, or they don't have the right packaging, or whatever it is. And I like that approach because I think that there is like a consultative type of a need for these brands, because they are usually small, scrappy teams. They have a ton of positives, but there are some things where if you don't know type of a situation, and you guys can kind of come in and say, hey, let's mold some of that excitement in a way that's going to be packaged up, that's going to be best fit for Costco, or best fit for Albertsons, or wherever. But mostly we're talking about here with Costco. To shift gears here and talk about your specific business and maybe how it's been affected by COVID-19. Has there been some good, bad, ugly? What have you seen on just your side of the business?
Well, one of the things that made Costco so successful and so exciting for consumers and their members is Costco has always been leading the way forward. I would say them and Whole Foods, but Costco has done an excellent job, especially for their size, at making emerging food brands and smaller food brands part of their DNA and their culture. And they've done so on a regional level because they have 8 U.S. regions. So you might find the latest hot sauce company out of Austin, and or a different category, the latest snack out of Austin, and that snack takes off in the Texas region, and Costco might not have found it. Like, one of the challenges Sam's has is that they don't have a lot of offices outside of the main corporate area for buying. So Costco gets the vibe and lives the life in a lot of the regions, and it allows them to bring items that their members may know locally, and if they do well enough, sometimes those brands that were that little brand in Austin become a big national brand thanks to the ability to move through the Costco culture there and get into the other buying offices. So there's, I think that does give Costco a competitive advantage because they can really work with brands of any size as well. So I think that helps. I think, what's interesting about the whole COVID-19 thing is we've got two challenges, and I have a lot of experience because with level one, when we opened up years ago, our big challenge was we were in the middle of the mortgage crisis. Mm-hmm. So And what happens is consumers, when the economy gets bad, have a tendency to look for value, and they cut back on restaurant shopping expenditures and other expenditures, and they move a little bit away from traditional supermarkets, and more will spend their food budgets at a Costco. So Costco does really well. Um, it seems like all the time, but they do especially well, and because Costco can move so quickly, they take advantage of trends in the marketplace much more quickly than a Safeway or a Whole Foods can react to. So that allows brands that haven't, especially ones that haven't focused on Costco before, to drive their revenue much more quickly during an economic crisis. Now, one of the things that I was looking at before the pandemic happened was I was getting very nervous probably mid last year. I felt like the only thing really holding up the economy was the consumers. And my worry and our advisement to our clients was be careful right now because, if the consumer stops spending, the economy could slide. Now, when the pandemic came, that's an added pressure on the market, which we've never entered a recessionary time and had a pandemic at the same time. So anyone that claims they know what's going to happen or what you should do is nuts. I base my views on my own experience, and some of the challenges that we're seeing that we didn't have happen during the mortgage crisis is because of the pandemic. The most negative aspect besides loss of life is that a lot of the buyers are not looking at new brands right now. So that's stifling a little bit the new brands that want to get launched at Costco or expand into Costco. And so until that passes and Costco is fully operational again, it's going to have a big impact. Another negative impact is that the demo company that Costco works with, CDS, they had to stop doing demos and road shows. And then last month, Advantage, which I believe owns CDS now, laid off, I think, 22,000 employees. And so even if Costco gets started up May 1st, they're going to have to figure out how they're going to deal with the demos. Are they going to start them up again? Because the demos and the road shows really drive traffic into the buildings because of that excitement. And so we're not sure how that's going to go. Another impact is on the positive side with this has been that many of our brands that are already established at Costco had huge sales in March and in early April because Costco was just saying, hey, if you're already approved, you got your vendor number, you're ready to roll, let's try these other items. And like one of our clients, instead of a 1 truckload order, got a 7 truckload order, which stressed their supply chain, but they were able to deliver. And some of our other brands have seen that type of sales increase. It's starting to level out now as Costco has put some implementations in to slow down the business so that they don't have so much traffic inside the buildings. They're changing their hours a little bit and trying to keep people separated a little more so that there's less people in the building all at the same time.
I was looking at Costco's March numbers. I'm sure you know them very well, but just for the people, I mean, there's about I think a 12% year-over-year growth rate, which I think is an acceleration of maybe about, I think it's maybe 25% or so off of like the base of 2019. So you're seeing a good amount of lift that's happening there. One of the things that I found interesting, maybe that was driving a little bit of Costco, was that there was around like the last weekend of February, there were some social media images that were getting shared of Costco's that were either just out of stock of certain items or just huge lines. And it was right around the time of the press conference with Trump on I think the 26th. And it seemed as if that was even an accelerant of Costco's kind of action of people going in there, because people were seeing maybe one region or maybe one store in a region that was, kind of got a big run on product. They didn't have time to stock it up. And then all of a sudden there was this fear that kind of got created with consumers that thought, wow, I need to control any element that I can control. And one of the things that I can control is like my maybe CPG buying. Like I need to stock my essentials. And they kind of did a huge run on all stores. But I think Costco was maybe that first one that kicked it off. And it kind of created just an immense amount of sales that happened for Costco that you could see in those numbers. But then another thing that I kind of noticed was that their e-commerce grew as well. I think 50% year over year on that month. And that's been an area that Costco has, I wouldn't say like held back, but I think it's, they're still trying to figure it out in a way, because you mentioned the merchandising is set up in a way, there's like a discoverability. There's, people, they want you to go into the store. They want you to go through the aisles. They want you to check out the new things that you didn't see last month or whatever, where online it's a little bit different. They haven't really figured out how to make that magical kind of discovery type of element, but it seems like people are choosing to go online anyways, and Costco can't slow it down because obviously people are trying to pick safety over maybe the discoverability, the experience of going into a Costco normally. Have you seen, I guess, and I'm not sure if you guys have any brands that maybe are only online or maybe have a good amount of traction online. Have you seen any kind of, I guess, clients see any of that advantage that's come up online?
Yeah, a few of ours have. I mean, you got to go back and look around the time of when you talk about the dot-com business, when Amazon acquired Whole Foods, there were a lot of analysts, and I don't like most of the analysts that are out there. I think they know a lot less than they get credit for. Really piled onto Costco saying they had a poor strategy on online. And what they didn't take into account is that Amazon is really an impulse buy a lot of the time. They're a very good retailer, but they don't carry items in the size that Costco does. And they don't have offerings. Like Costco has some really special offerings online that Amazon doesn't even have in hard goods and, pools and things like, I mean, they've got a lot of stuff on there, but, Amazon had the opposite problem of Costco in that Amazon had their fresh business that they were trying to get into, and it was failing. And they then realized they had to get into brick and mortar. So Costco and Amazon really had opposite problems, but it was very similar. And now you look at where Costco is for the last year and a half, and their sales have been up anywhere from, on average, around 33% to around 44% per quarter, which is fantastic growth for someone who's not considered to be like a top online provider. And you're right, they do have a balance because they don't want to ruin the store experience, but Amazon doesn't have an answer for that exciting treasure hunt item. Costco does. And another area within the e-com space for Costco has been that for the heavier items, you can go into the store. But if you look at the cost of Prime, Amazon struggled to keep those costs down, and now they're passing all of those costs onto the vendors. So you're seeing items that used to be $12 and $14 that when they're on Prime, they're like $29 and $35, and they're not as price competitive with Costco anymore. So I think both companies will do very well in this environment, and I think Costco continues to do well. I still think that some analysts are overestimating that that consumers are going to stick with the e-commerce. I think that if you didn't have the pandemic and you just had a bad economy, let's say, I don't think there would have been the mass rush because people still would have gone into the supermarkets and purchased. And it's still really hard to buy a salad, fruit, eggs, things like that online unless you're already accustomed to buying that brand, or you're not going to just go buy Amazon eggs on Amazon if you haven't experienced them before. And another area that I think is underestimated with this is that, and I think I'm basically saying I think consumers will return in large numbers once the pandemic is over back into their grocery stores because they like interacting with the cashier. One thing that we've learned through the pandemic, if is that people like to treat their shopping experiences almost as social events. They talk to the butcher, they talk to the cashier forever, unfortunately, sometimes. And sometimes I'm buying two items I want to get out of the store, and the cashier and the woman are talking about, tickets to the opera or something, and I'm like, come on. But anyway, everyone has their way they shop and their experience, and I think things will go back to some of those same type of experience after once you separate the pandemic from the shopping experience. Because right now I know we're buying a lot, but the other thing is the services like the DoorDashes of the world and the Instacart. Instacart right now is it used to be just, well, it takes 2 hours. That's it. So if you order at 12, you'll have it by 2. But sometimes it's like a 5-hour wait or a 10-hour wait because so many people are now discovering Instacart and they didn't even know about Instacart. And so now that's how they're ordering, and those services are overloaded with orders and they can't meet them. It's sort of like, the ticket industry, when concert tickets go on sale, they still haven't figured out how to deal with the first hour of ticket sales because they get a rush, their servers still crash. Everyone's sitting there thinking getting tickets, that little ball is spinning around. And it's a very frustrating process. And some of that's happening. Now, over time, those companies will scale, but you can't scale for a pandemic. And you can't, you can scale for a recession up or down, but the pandemic is a wild card that's hard to tell, when it's going to go away, if it's going to come back. And so as all businesses have to be prepared for that. And we still haven't gone through the worst of the bankruptcies that are coming. What just happened with oil today was a real shock, dropping into negative territory. And so, there's, according to things that I read, there's companies just lining up to go bankrupt, and some of the airlines will probably go bankrupt. There's just no easy way to recover it. The main thing the president has to do in Congress is to keep us from going into a depression instead of a recession. And I personally, I don't get into politics too much, but I think he's having Trump as president is creating more panic on top of it, that if we had a calmer president like we did with President Bush after 9/11 and President Obama after, during the mortgage crisis, I think that would have settled things down and there wouldn't have been as much panic. But Trump has never made a speech about panicking and said, don't panic, we're going to get through this, slow down, take your time. He's not that type of person. And he's kind of, like a CEO, when there's problems at a company, you want someone who's going to who's steady and can guide the company through. And unfortunately, he just doesn't have that skill set.
I would agree with you. I mean, I have not used the D word yet. I don't want to jinx it. I've been, for the last probably 6 or 8 weeks, very much paying attention to a lot of the economic indicators, kind of the area that I focus a lot of my attention. I keep the public health stuff to the people that know that stuff very well. I was more worried about what the economy was going to do and how do we create stop gaps and then behavioral patterns that was going to help us get through this. And I agree with you. I think that the consumer eventually kind of comes back. I don't necessarily think it's, what a lot of, economists are saying, like it's going to be a V shape. I think it's more probably a U or a W if people can kind of see what that looks like from a growth and a retraction type of standpoint. But I think where we have a lot of time to really see a lot of the ripples come to fruition. I think you're seeing some of the most vulnerable areas get hit first. You mentioned some of the travel areas. Also, maybe the clothing retailers that I think have about a 50% month, or I think it's month-over-month and year-over-year loss in retail sales right now. And you have, I think, J.C. Penney's, I think you have Macy's, Neiman Marcus, a bunch of them that are already either in search of new financing, trying to do. They've missed interest payments. They've, basically saying, we're almost at the point of giving up at this point. So you're seeing, I think, some of those more weaker sectors or ones that got hit the most by this kind of economic tremors that are going to get hit first. And I think when you see those things fall, then other things in the system fall. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing that people misinterpret. There's linkages. Everybody's linked in some way. And when a supplier can't pay you for this, or they're stretching these terms or whatever, that creates stress to the business below it and the business sideways of it, and it just creates this crazy ripple effect that I think is going to be one that we're going to be paying attention to definitely throughout 2020 and then maybe into 2021, and we'll kind of see from there what kind of happens. I want to bring this back to the online grocery piece because I did want to make some comments around that. I agree as well with you, Jeremy, in terms of I don't think that this is the tipping point where like everybody turns into online grocery shoppers. I think it does help create a bunch of trial. The people that were totally against it, that said I would never do this because I want to pick my bananas, or I know the meat better than the Instacart, or, whatever. I think all of those arguments fell off because you started to think about your health and you thought, well, it's not really worth me picking out my bananas. I might as well let somebody else on the front line kind of deal with that. So I've been watching like two specific things on that to see like how far I think this accelerates, because I don't think it like triples, the rate of adoption or anything. But I think that you have the length of time that I think we're under this restricted living makes this more important, because the more the more you get used to a new behavioral pattern, the more willing you can to institute that. So like the first time you try online grocery, it's hard because you're used to going through the aisles. Everybody has their own shopping kind of traditions and the way they like to do it. Right. But then you're getting thrown into like a search algorithm, and you have to like search by words each thing you're looking for, and maybe you can't find or you don't even know maybe the brand that you buy. You just know that it's a yellow and a blue label, or whatever, and it creates these kind of weird hurdles that you have to come over. But the more that you do it, the more that you get comfortable with it. So I think the longer maybe we're at stay at home or restricted living, the better chance that has of being sticky. And then the other one is, I think, as the Costcos or the Targets or the Walmarts create more restrictions into the way that they can shop from like a public health standpoint. Like you can only go so many per square foot into the store. You have to go, down the aisle one way and come back the other way. And, they want to create all these, that creates like less convenience as a consumer. I wouldn't want to go into a Walmart if I had to wait in line and then I also had to shop in a certain way. It would turn it off to me, and I'd be maybe more willing to do online grocery shopping at that point. So I think it's going to bring in another wave of people based around how restricted those stores get. So those are the two like maybe areas that I've been trying to pay attention to. The higher those two kind of areas get, the more there's a stickiness to like what's happening. But I don't believe that this is like fundamentally going to triple online grocery or anything. Like some of these analysts are going a little bit way off the deep end with some of their predictions. And I don't know if they're paying attention to like the very fundamental like consumer behavioral things like you mentioned about like it's a going to a grocery store is very intimate. It's very unique. It's very much a experience that everybody does differently. And I don't think people are going to just uproot that for anything unless they really, really have to.
Yeah, I think you mentioned two things that are important. I'll get to the second one in a minute, which is supply chain. And the first one is that I think that what the analysts are missing is they're talking about it from 100,000 foot level. And I would say that 95% of our Amazon ordering that we've done is late. And so here I am, I'm waiting for my whatever I've ordered from Amazon, and I keep getting these emails about, well, we're sorry, it's delayed a week, it's delayed 6 weeks. And there's a lot of that going on. And that is not a consumer that wants something quickly is not going to put up with that. And Amazon has really fallen down. It's not totally their fault, but it's not like there's somebody you can call at Amazon very easily and say, where the hell is my order? And so you're really just communicating via email and text. And I think for a vast majority of consumers, when they start experience more of that, they're going to say, you know what, I can't wait for this thing to be over so I can go back to my old habit. And I think Amazon and others could lose that opportunity that they had during the pandemic. Now, I also understand that the whole economy is not designed for a pandemic. So, but I'm looking at it from a rational side because I'm in the food business that, hey, if all of a sudden, if normally you have 14,000 orders and now you have 114,000, it's going to break your supply chain. And I watched an interesting interview this morning with the CEO, I forget his name, of Cummings Industries. And he said what people are missing in the supply chain is, let's say they've got offices all over the world and they're a manufacturer and they've got a huge supply chain. So he said, I could tell you I'm opening my doors May 1st, but my suppliers aren't. So where I get my ingredients or my parts, I don't know when they're going to be open. So how can I open? And he said, the government's not taking any of this into account. So he said, I'm not trying to criticize the president, was his words, but he said that no one is thinking about it. It's kind of like leaving a car and you go on a trip for 2 months and come back and then expect it to start up right away. It's not going to in most situations. You're going to have somebody come out and charge it. And so when you turn off a supply chain, it doesn't just come back on. Then the next question is, how will the payments flow? A lot of the companies that are in supply chains are struggling right now because you look at food service. Food service has been torn up. Facebook and Google, which were driving so much business through that channel, their employees, most of them aren't in the office now. So they're hurting, and then they're getting hurt by their restaurant business. So even if May 1st, everything in the United States turned on, there's going to be no engine to drive it. And that was always my problem with giving everybody $1,000 or $2,000 is that the pandemic aspect of it, the government hasn't said, they think consumers are going to go out and spend. And I say, where? I get it'll help with their rent, but they're not going to rush into the store and start buying things. There's just no way. There's no way you could do that. So I think it's going to take a lot longer to start things back up. I think we're going to see, excuse me, the economic impact last a lot longer than most people are thinking. I think this is going to go well into 2021. And just as I was saying earlier with Costco, I don't know how they're going to hire back all 22,000 of these demo people. Even if let's say they are, that's going to take time. And the company that's hiring all these people, maybe the people will be around, maybe they won't be, maybe it'll take longer. So there are a lot of pieces to this that the average person isn't used to. And I think one of the things that we from a knowledge standpoint, we now understand how dangerous it is to have a supply chain from all over the world, because you can't go and grab from all these people the way you could from your supply chain. So maybe more companies will come back and reestablish U.S. supply chains so that things are much closer together. But I don't know. Now, the next big worry is, are we going back to work too early? And I really think if we rush back and we then have to go to another shutdown and shelter at home again, then without a doubt you're going to head into a depression, and it'll affect industries very differently. But people aren't going to be able to survive a second one, which is why I'm in favor really of waiting until June or July, suffering a little bit more, and at least getting into the warm season and hoping by then that we can reduce enough. Because, think about it. Would you get on an airplane May 1st and you're packed in on an airplane and you don't know whether the person next to you has the virus or not? And then what if they do and you get it? And the government right now, which I think they're starting to run into a wall with the businesses, is the businesses don't really want to open unless they know that there's going to be testing, so that things can be proven and factual. And then some businesses are going to, again, back to this guy, the CEO of Cummins, he says, we're going to have to redesign our whole internal manufacturing process so that people aren't next to each other. So I don't know how long any of that's going to take, and any of that stuff. So it would be good to get some of the businesses back going where we can, but I think this rush could work out to be a huge mistake if we're not careful.
I mean, there's a ton to unpack there, but I tend to agree with a lot of it. I've been probably a lot more aggressive towards the reopening process, and that might be because of healthy younger individual. I kind of want to get out. I'm like, patience is not my thing a lot of times. So I think, like, on a personality level, I've definitely been kind of pushing in that way, and to shift this into some of the emerging brands that you work with, and a lot of them being owned by younger individuals, millennials like myself. Have you seen any of them kind of being hungry, I guess, and even to get a little bit more value towards this? What kind of advice have you been giving to some of these entrepreneurs of these emerging food brands right now to, like, kind of use this time in a constructive, positive way over thinking about the negatives?
Well, first of all, I tell them, I share with a lot of them my experience in 2009 with the mortgage crisis and how it impacted companies, and that from a positive aspect, at least right now, you can still borrow money, which people, if especially younger people, if they were not at a company or own their own company during 2009 mortgage crisis, you couldn't borrow 25 cents. There was just no place to go to get money. And even the credit card companies were cutting in half their credit lines that their card members had. So I just tell them the most important thing is that a lot of your clients are going to pull to the side. I mean, your competitors pull to the side of the road, and then when things start up, they won't be ready. So get everything you need done now. If you're trying to go to Costco, get your pricing down. Work on it now while you have the time, and then you're going to be ready to go all balls out when the doors start opening everywhere. If you wait until the last minute, then you're going to be playing catch up, and you will have wasted the time that was here. And if you're a younger entrepreneur with a new food brand and you've been successful prior to the pandemic and the recession that we're now in, you should still be successful going forward. So don't change too much of your company, because what's been working in the past, I don't believe, as I said earlier, that we're going to come out of this environment and be in a radically different world where consumers' buying habits and everything else have changed so much that all of a sudden the new latest greatest brand that's out there that's been doing, going sales going through the roof are going to be now invaluable. And I think some of the analysts on Wall Street are all excited about Kraft Heinz. Of course, people are going to go back to the brands. They're going to go to Campbell's Soup. You can buy a can of Campbell's Soup and it'll last you till 10,000 years. That doesn't mean you should be eating it. Like, Oreos and high carb crap that people are eating right now, a lot of that is just to get the emotional high from, if being in a stressful period. But, you won't have to worry about the pandemic if you're loading up on Oreo cookies and high fat potato chips and all this other stuff. You'll be in the hospital. And so it's really important. It's really important that people remember that what was working before this are most likely going to be working again, and it's not something you should radically change unless your business had slowed going into the pandemic. Then you should, and I tell our clients, be focused on your innovation. Do not stop innovating. This is valuable time that you have now more than ever to innovate. And don't, if you can, you don't want to lose your key employees, because if you lay them off, they're not going to be easy to get back, and someone will pick them up because they know how valuable they are.
Yeah, I think there's an element of, prioritization, and then like rationalization of all the decisions, being that from your labor to any cost to just the projects that you're working on. I think that this is the time for everybody to take a few steps back and really address a lot of the things that they probably needed to do before this kind of all started. But I agree in terms of really doubling down on things that are working, because they're going to work after this. Especially if the last month of March has been very positive, I think that's giving you a lot of confidence to continue to invest in that. And when this all kind of goes back to some semblance of normalcy, I think that those sequences and patterns that they've been able to figure out are going to work again. They might need a few degrees of shift, but I think overall, I think they're going to work out pretty well. I appreciate the conversation, Jeremy. I think it was extremely insightful. I think we touched on a lot of really good points of conversation that I think are going to make some people think. But if people want to work with you, get to know a little bit of the work that you guys do, how do they get in contact with you or follow you?
They can follow me on LinkedIn, really easy to find, or they can email me at jeremy@launchpadgroupusa.com, or just call me 650-576-8803. I take all calls. So, we've been, after what happened at Expo West, where they canceled at the last minute, we spent a lot of time on LinkedIn. I made an offer to consult with brands that were new, because I knew they lost all their money on their booths. And so we're always there to help. The industry's been good to me, so I spent a lot of time giving back. And, I just want to, tell everybody out there, if, we'll get through this if we stick together and you stay focused on your values and take care of your employees. And, there's a word I use a lot in my business because it's the key to success, and that's building momentum. And so even though now it's a little bit harder, you've got to find ways to continue to build that momentum. And then, you'll be ready to rock and roll as soon as everything is back open.
I couldn't have said it better myself, Jeremy. Thank you again for your time. I appreciate it.
Great. Take care. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching this video. If you want to help support me, make sure you guys hit that thumbs up button on this video. If this is the first time you've been introduced to my videos, would love for you guys to be a part of my community by subscribing to my channel. I upload several videos just like this weekly. And if you guys want to connect further outside of this platform, I do include all of my social media links down below. I just want to thank you guys again for your time. Hopefully I gave you some value in return, and we'll see you guys on the next video.